Okay. I'm David DeSerto. I'm Director of Faith Programming here at the Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen Center for Thought and Culture. Special place that we like to describe as a haven where spirituality and the arts meet. Quick show of hands. How many of you have been here before? Okay, a couple. How many are here for the first time? Okay. How many of you came out tonight just because you can't stay home, watch the Yankees and the Mets lose anymore? Yeah, a few hands. Well, if you're first-timers or long-timers, please know how delighted we are that you chose to spend part of your Wednesday evening with us, and how delighted we are to be hosting this special event with Young Catholic Professionals NYC and the Sovereign Order of Malta. We really look forward to building relationships like this, and we encourage you to visit our website, sheencenter.org, to find out about all our upcoming programming. Because at the end of the night, we really want each and every one of you to feel like this is your home. This is your art center. And if I could give you all one assignment, I really ask that you go home, tell your friends about the Sheen Center. And speaking of friends, without further ado, it is my distinct pleasure to invite to the stage the president of YCP NYC, Mr. Joe Putnick.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Cool. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Good evening. Welcome to our August executive panel with the Sovereign Order of Malta. This is our first executive panel. We're just under a year old, so this is exciting for us, kind of a seminal event to finally do an event with an organization. If it looks like I'm looking back and forth, I think usually there's something you look at here where you see what your next slide is, but I'm going to be kind of looking here and there. So tonight's agenda, it's been some time since I've had a chance to address our membership, and anytime we have an audience like this, we love to just kind of talk about the work we're up to, and then obviously hear all about the great things that the Order of Malta is up to. So I'm going to talk for a brief bit. I don't think this is mentioned, but we are not going to have an intermission, so if you need to use the restroom, you're not going to offend us, feel free to stand up. I'm going to talk. I'm going to bring up Father for a blessing, an opening blessing. We're going to hear from our panelists in their own individual talks. They all have their own separate topic. We'll jump right into executive panel. We'll end in a closing prayer, and then we encourage you to join us right across the street, or it's on the other side of the street, but at Solancha for, which one am I pointing? See, now I know I'm pointing the wrong way. Okay, we'll be at Solancha right after this. Tonight's panelists, we have really an all-star panel. All different depending on kind of what you're interested or who you're looking forward to hearing from. Our first speaker will be Fra Nicola Tigoni. He's with us. He's right here in the front row. He'll talk about kind of the global, a large overview of the Order of Malta. We'll then hear from Ken Craig on the American Association, Francesca Tempesta on the New York City area, and then we invite James Harrison Greenwood and his trainees. He is with the United Nations. So like I said, we're so thankful for all of you guys, so thankful to everyone. We kind of got this event in short order. We actually had a different panel planned, and but it has all worked out perfectly. So I do want to give a thanks to obviously David DeCerto. David's going to be our moderator. Our ambitions are to have this nice long partnership with the Sheen Center, so David will be with us for a while. He's a friend of ours. Mary Lou Pagano, who's been a great leader of the Sheen Center, and then all the staff. We've got people backstage. It's really an A-class production. I'd also like to thank a few people who have been close to me and people who made tonight possible. Dr. Mike Espiritu, Fuad Haba, and Jason Pelletier. So gentlemen, thank you. And to everyone else who I've met who is a knight or dame that I knew before tonight, thank you again. Looking ahead, if you like what you have tonight and you'd like to join us in the future, our plan at the moment is to be back here. It's either going to be September 20th or the 27th with the Lumen Institute. So if you're here for our May event, that was with Steve Auth. Steve's one of the founders of the Lumen Institute. We're going to have different Lumen members and Lumen fellows talk to us in a very similar format as tonight. And then, like I said, we launched October of last year. I remember seeing some of your guys' faces. So it'll be our first anniversary party at the moment, the gymnasium of Old St. Patrick's. And then from there, we'll be back here at the Sheen Center with hopefully the Legatus organization. I would be remiss, I'm sure this will get talked about tonight, but really probably the preeminent gala of the New York City Gala season is the White Cross Ball, which is put on by the Order. It really is one of just the over-the-top, best events, and obviously goes towards a great cause. They've been nice enough to give us a discount for all of our membership, so we'll send that out to you. And then in December, if you guys are with us for our Advent party, we're probably going to do that back at the same place at the Solarium of the Three West Club. And then we just got confirmation. If you're ever wondering how far Cardinal Dolan plans his schedule, it's about 15 to 18 months. So Cardinal is committed to join us, so that'll be, ideally if we're around long enough, our second anniversary on October 3rd. So that's a pretty immovable date for Cardinal. We'll let you know on the location as soon as we know. So what is YCP? Who is it? Very generic term, serves kind of a large swath of people. When we use that phrase, we're really using it as a catch-all to say just about anybody between the ages of 22 to 40 in a given metro area that's even nominally Catholic. They could have been baptized and are present day, have no association with the Catholic Church. We're considering YCP to be as far-ranging and kind of shallow depths in terms of our membership. But really the purpose, I gotta find out where I got a point. The purpose, where am I pointing? Is, from 0 to 22, it's a very, you're in that, you're a child within the family unit. It's very well structured, very well sequenced. You almost don't even realize kind of the formation, whether it's your faith formation, your character formation that's going on. But a common feeling for a lot of us is as you graduate, it's up to you now, right? It's kind of open seas. So about, I think exactly 13 years ago, this woman in Texas, Jen Baugh, founded YCP Dallas as just a way to say, let's have a meetup group, let's build community that's not necessarily parish-based or based on anything other than we're all Catholic, right? And fast forward today, we have 34 chapters, and it's, I believe, the largest national network of Catholics. And its serving point is in those kind of in-between transition years, you're building your career, you're maybe graduating, you're starting your own family, you're moving cities, moving houses. Community becomes pretty fluid, right? You don't have that same upbringing, you don't have the same, comforts of home. So how do you build community in a city where maybe it doesn't always feel like that? So that's kind of the long and the short of it. Our core programming, like I've said, this is our first executive panel, but really the bread and butter is meant to be our happy hour. So if you're with us, we had one in June and July. And then our executive speakers. And it's key on the word executive because we don't, as there's so many accomplished folks in their 20s and 30s that are Catholic we could hear from, we can learn from, that's great. We do want to give the people that have really gone through life, maybe they're even retired, but they've been through 20, 30, 40 years of their career. This is kind of their opportunity to kind of memorialize, give them a captive audience and say, what would you like to say? What do young Catholics need to hear in the current moment? What would you like to tell your former self? But if you've been to one of these events, you know that we never say what the speech title is or when the speaker is talking. Because really, even if it's notorious here, the speaker may not show up or it may not be as well prepared as you would imagine the average speech. The goal really is always in just community. You show up, you have, just like something like Catholic NYC, it is a recurring community that you can go to, you can build relationships with, and if you can learn something along the way, that's great. We're gonna kind of mash these things together with in terms of going deeper, we sell this membership, never a hard sell for us, but if you'd like to join, I think it's $36 a year. There's another one that's like, I think $70 a year. But it involves mentorship, it involves forums, spiritual hotlines, things like that. But something they're traditionally adamant about is charging for a panel discussion. They want this to be a paid event, they want it to be member only. I'm not gonna do that. I want traditionally most of my events to be free. But we're gonna try to take that spirit of a couple executives and then that panel discussion and just have a great night of learning and sharing knowledge. So, this is something, we want to continue to do, and hopefully, other places around the country will model after us. And then if you really are saying, man, what else can I do? There is an annual conference that's in Dallas in April of every year. So all Catholics of all ages go, and it's not quite like World Youth Day, but it's a great gathering of about 1,000 of us, and it's a lot of fun. Tonight, you'll notice we talked about there being a panel or a theme to our panel. Traditionally, when we ask executives to talk, we put almost no guardrails. We don't ask them to talk about any specific thing. Maybe it's too sensitive. Maybe they have their own thing in mind. But with these panel discussions, we do want it to be guided by the virtues that guide our own moral framework of our Catholic life. So we have theological virtues. I can't even tell if I'm pointing. This is really our theological virtues. That's how we're building a connection with God, right? Through faith, through hope, through prayer. Our cardinal virtues, think of cardinal just the way it is, as a direction. This is what helps us kind of navigate the complexities of life. So you have justice, prudence, temperance, fortitude. And then our patron saint is St. Joseph. And as we know, St. Joseph, really one of his foundations was on humility. So you have humility, obedience, perseverance, and diligence. And then other virtues, there's just about anyone else. But all of these really make up kind of the foundation of what it means to live and serve God in a great way. So it's meant to be dialogical. It's meant to not ever have one consistent answer. We hope that what's discussed tonight or what gets discussed at any point sparks some conversation in the after events or the socials we do afterwards. It's nothing we're going to solve ever in a vacuum, but these are the virtues that we intend to explore over the next 2 to 3 years, really. So that's all well and good. Those are events. That's kind of the what, but what is the how? And we talk a lot about the word faith formation, and to be candid with you guys, this is my own very lay understanding, so I would actually love to be corrected on this. But when I think about faith formation, it's kind of binary. So we have studying scripture. Oh, sorry, I'm going to stand to the side. Catechism, religious education, CCD, RCIA, things like that. Our spiritual formation, spiritual direction, worship, prayer, going to Mass, receiving the sacraments, service, and outreach to the poor, which we'll hear a lot about tonight. I think in terms of maybe core sins, we're going to talk about, when we talk about a young and old population, that's millennial and Gen Z. We love, all generations, but those are kind of the two audiences we're catering to. The core sins of those two generations, to me, you have a hyper-individualism and a hyper-meritocracy. We were kind of inculcated with the idea, our peers are our competition. If somebody falls behind, that's okay. I need to run my own race. I just need to worry about myself. But in living a good life and the life that God's calling us to, I don't think that's going to cut it. So when we think about the base of the formation, right, these are all things we can do at the individual level. You don't need anyone else. But at the base of this formation, we have joining in community and evangelization. Our May speaker, quite literally, is Steve Auth, among like 15 things. He does street evangelization. He's this very successful Wall Street executive. He's quite literally on the corner of 6th Avenue doing street evangelization. For most of us, though, I think evangelization happens more in a one-to-one form, right? It's more micro. You don't even realize it. You don't realize you're evangelizing. You don't realize how much you're actually kind of serving the cause. So we consider these things to be at the group level. But when you think about a comprehensive formation, something we're really going for, not explicitly, I think this is what a whole picture looks like. And when you think about YCP, when you think about ministries like the Order of Malta, anything else, that's what we mean when we're saying we want to guide you to these types of communities. If, for those of you who work in the corporate world, this gets reused quite a bit, but the Dunning-Kruger curve is something that I've thought about and how it applies to our faith formation, kind of at the individual level, what it kind of feels like. But it really is supposed to explain kind of the heuristics of someone who goes from a beginner to, being an expert, if you will. So this top line up here, where's my speaker? Peak of Mount Stupid is really supposed to kind of memorialize the idea of beginner's hubris, right? We try something, it's pretty easy. I tried it once. I think about, so I work in AI and data science. It seemed like everyone became an AI expert overnight when ChatGPT came out. But as soon as you kind of take a few steps, you realize that it's not that easy. I know the secondary market for musical instruments is notorious for like almost brand new, right? It's been played once or twice and it's sold for half the rate. You never buy those new. So there's all these things that a lot of people intentionally give, or not intentionally, but whether it's just through lack of throughput, they give up. Applying that to our own formation, think of it, when you were initially catechized, right? You went through baptism, you went through kind of the baptismal affirmations, you were confirmed. And like I said, that kind of crucial moment of 18 to 22, whether it was going to college or coming into professional life, and all that kind of stops. And you kind of said, you know what, I'm good. I see God, I see the church, I understand it. This is it. I did what my parents asked me to do. But then, without realizing it, we find ourselves in this valley. And that valley is, you could think of it, the bread and circuses of life. It is not the place you want to live. but it's unfortunately a landing spot for a lot of people. And suddenly, as we see up here, the person that at least he thinks he sees it, this guy's a little further along, but it's even further ahead. Suddenly, this goal is now impossible to see. And let's just distract ourselves with all the other kind of trappings of life. But as we think about how we, get out of that valley, that sort of, I know the expression, I think, is beginner's hell, or it's always hardest in the beginning. It's a hard, whatever you're doing, but when we think about our, growing closer to God, character formation, faith formation, it's really hard to do alone. So who helps us pull out of the valley is each other, right? It's community. So we know that it's a lifelong ambition, it's a lifelong venture to really, our relationship with Christ, but it's something that we know that we need to do together. And I think this is the learning pyramid. I don't know if anyone here is an educator or an academician, but this should have been shown to, I think, all of us when we started college, or I know for me, college was like 15 years ago. But if you see on the bottom three, the base of the pyramid, the real core foundations of our learning are what? Teaching others, practice by doing, and discussion groups. To me, that's what evangelization looks like. It's not so much that we're like Mr. Oth, we're on the street corner, but it really happens at that base level. Something like lecture and reading, or even audiovisual, those are things that could remind you of something like a mass, right? That's why you go every week. It's 5 to 10%. You need to hear it pretty often. But the core, the real sustaining factor happens at the relationship level. So I've always said YCP can be best summarized that our friends are our best teachers. So this is all well and good to ourselves, right? That I talked about the meritocratic culture, only worrying about ourselves, but how do we think about all of us? How do we think about the city? How do we think about the nation, the globe, right? We're gonna kind of cover the 3 different areas tonight. Well, for us, let's imagine that this is, our faith kind of falls into a perfect distribution curve. And how many of us are completely well-formed? Let's say our priests are, where's my pointer, to the right in that first quartile. And then this room would really be what we would call practicing Catholics, right? Total congruence with inner and outer belief systems. Your actions match your words. No one's really surprised if I said, did you know XYZ is Catholic? Like, of course. But then it kind of starts to decay a little bit. And this is not any one person's fault. But then you get the idea of a cultural Catholic. No offense to them, but they're gonna, say a lot of the same things, but the follow through, the actual practice, they just need a little bit of encouragement. And then as we start to go, we have lapsed Catholic, which is, they're starting to really fall away. And then you have people who have unfortunately really fallen away, and I'm actually related to some of these, so I live this pretty acutely. But I made the logo into a ball because the idea with community, the idea with formation, the idea with how we can all help each other is, if you think of the ball, pushing that ball up the hill, well, if I'm over here, it's really just a nudge, right? That cultural Catholic just needs a little bit of a nudge, and they're kind of coasting downhill, which is where we want them. But this second or this third and fourth one, it's going to take a lot of work. And if you have these folks in your life, you know what that sort of exchange is like. But when you think about, it's so interesting, like the Sheen Center, we're right next to the original Planned Parenthood. I always think when I walk by here, it's like Dorothy Day and Margaret Sanger, right? That's the same, they lived in the same New York at the same time. Those conversion scenes of Augustine and Dorothy Day, it mimicked more on the left, right? It was that powerful, they were living one way in their 20s and their youth, and then it really went to the other side, and they lived this great devout life. So in any sense, as much as, I have no position to throw stones, all of these people are Catholic. I'm going to show the next slide of what that looks like in the city. But when I go back to that initial slide of like who do we consider a member, who's within YCP, it's all of these people. It's the people we work with, it's your friends, it's your employees, and it's the people that are just looking, like I said, for that invite back, but at the peer level. So where we see a lot of great power and a lot of great opportunity, you probably wouldn't guess, but it's about 2.8 million Catholics just in New York City. And then among our target demo, you've got about 700,000. There's 65 parishes in New York or in Manhattan. It doesn't always feel like all 700,000 are there every week, right? So to me, we have this great, right, we're going through this Eucharistic revival, this great opportunity for our own evangelization and just to really invite a lot of these folks back. And then for those of you who grew up in the Northeast, the top 5 most Catholic states in the country, I think these are also the top 5 most Italian states, just by coincidence. It's basically like taking a train from Philly to Boston, right? You have, and that makes sense in terms of the migration patterns. So for us, we're like, man, we've just launched, and it's not that YCP is any one thing. It's just meant, like I said, it's just this lighthouse of community. So to say it in a different way, as we invite people back, we're not really a landing spot. You know, we're going to learn so much tonight, but we hope that all these events push you to something further, and it really, you know, you kind of listen to your own calling and what God's calling you to do. So, like I said, I was involved with this 6-7 years ago when I lived in Chicago. Didn't think I would be involved with it afterwards, but YCP now has 34 chapters. It's only growing. It's only getting bigger. What does that mean, and why does that matter? As much as we have people come up to us saying, hey, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about this event? Or why don't you guys do this? We always say that's just an invite for that person to go kind of run with the ball. What we can give is basically a national network. New York could be your beta test. You build something up here, and we love to be able to evangelize those things and share that throughout. So suddenly, let's say even something like, you know, the Order of Malta, we want everybody across the country to know what this is. Whether they listen to it, whether they respond to it, or something happens is entirely up to them, but that's kind of what we think is the great effect. So we're recording tonight, and then, you know, we'll see kind of what goes from there. If you're wanting to get involved, a lot of people ask me, can we join the team? The team is, we're at a pretty good spot right now, but we are actively building. So the YCP chapters are not necessarily regional, they're by archdiocese. So if you know anything about New York, the Archdiocese of New York goes from Staten Island, basically north-south, up to the Hudson Valley. Diocese of Brooklyn is completely separate, and then there's like 3 archdioceses that make up North Jersey. So Bishop Brennan wants 2 chapters in YCP. He wants YCP Brooklyn and YCP Queens. That's actively in formation. If something like what we do really appeals to you guys, they've kind of committed to do these things in like Williamsburg and just anything that's really still close to the city, so it's not like you're going too far out, but still a great opportunity. And then Fairfield County, YCP Connecticut, they're also in need of board members and leaders as well. Okay, so I'm going to invite up Father to give the blessing in a second, but I do want to acknowledge what also makes up our team is our chaplaincy, and we've been really blessed by the folks, or our priests that have answered the call and have really supported us and provided spiritual direction. If you know any of these guys, they really are phenomenal. Father Isaiah was our primary chaplain. He's the chaplain of NYU, celebrates Mass at St. Joe's, is just an all-star. And I think, again, when I was talking about priests or Catholics under 40, I think he's like 28 or 29 years old. Like he's really a rock star. Father Daniel Ray has been with us really since the beginning. He's still with us, and he's been, personally to me, provided me with a lot of spiritual direction. And then Father Peter Martyr and Father John Baptist were with us for some period of time, but had to kind of step back. Our priests are, you know, so overwhelmed. They have so much going on, and then we come and we ask them to kind of, you know, give even more, and they've really done, you know, as much as they could. So we really appreciate it. The person I'm going to bring up, though, I think is special to a lot of people in this room. He was really, I use the word lighthouse. I think he was a lighthouse priest in kind of my own sort of surreptitious events. I unknowingly attended his ordination mass in July of 2019, and then we were going to do this big YCP roadshow and introduce it to everybody. And what ended up happening is we gave one after mass announcement, and that happened to be at Father Graby's mass. And then kind of what proceeded during that time was, in my mind, you know, something that should have never happened, but you know, Father is still very much with us, and I ran into him in March this year, and I said, Father, I have no idea kind of what you've been going through, but I want to let you know, like, we have your back, we want you with us, I'd love for you to be our chaplain. And I said that thinking he'd be like, Joe, no, I can't, not right now. And he said yes immediately, because that's really, you know, says more about him. But a lot of people in this room really stood by his side as well, and I want to acknowledge them. This is a great dinner they had. And I do want to say tomorrow's actually his birthday. So we got Father a little birthday present. But I would like to invite up our new head chaplain of YCP, Father Brian Graby.
Thank you, Joe, very much for that very kind and indeed flattering invitation, and for hosting this event, and for that very thoughtful introductory presentation. I'm sitting there watching it and looking at the different statistics and figures, and that emphasis on community is so important, not just for its own sake, but because it's so deeply rooted in our faith, in what we believe and who we are. And we see this from the very beginning, right? God said in the garden, it is not good for man to be alone. We see that even in our Lord's own ministry. He sent the disciples out in pairs, 2 by 2. We need the help, the support, the encouragement of others to keep us going when we're strong, to pick us up when we're flagging, when we're falling behind. You know, our Lord himself needed Simon of Cyrene to help him carry his own cross. And that's not a coincidence. We are made in the image and likeness of God. And we have a God who is himself a community of persons, 3 persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, because God is love. And love requires another. It requires a beloved, someone who can receive our love and return it back to us in kind. And I think it's a very happy confluence this evening that we have 2 groups represented, one fairly young, one quite ancient, both dedicated to that commitment of community, to serving others, especially with Malta, the neglected, the marginalized, the disenfranchised, and with young Catholic professionals to help each other to live out our call to discipleship in whatever way we're able to do that in our state and life. And so as we're about to hear from these wonderful speakers before us this evening, let's just take a moment in prayer to ask God's blessing upon us. Heavenly Father, we call down your blessing upon us this evening. Bless young Catholic professionals, bless the knights and dames of Malta, bless the good work that they do, that we, all of us here this evening, might see you in everyone we meet, remembering always that what we do for the least of our brethren, we do for you, we do to you. And give us the grace to live up to that high calling, that calling of charity, and that we might live out our faith with faith and hope and love in all that we do and all that we say, always giving a worthy witness to you, the God who is love. And may Almighty God bless you all gathered here, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you.
So I do want to thank you, Father. That was beautiful. If you guys know anything about Father, there's 3 things he really loves. At least I found in the last 6 months. He loves politics. He's really good at squash, loves squash, and he loves wine. So we got Father. I'm going to mispronounce it, but this was like a vineyard where Pope John the 22nd lived, and apparently it is the wine you give to priests when the time comes. So, Father, thank you again.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. Please buy Father, and when you're at Solange, Father lives in Manhattan, straight up. So just repeat that to yourself, Manhattan, straight up. No, I'm kidding. But no, thank you again. I'm going to invite up Frau Nicola to get us started, and we look forward to seeing you guys afterwards. So thanks for coming.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here this evening. Many of you I know already, and some are new faces, so thank you. I'm very excited, really on behalf of all of us, to introduce to you our beloved order. As Father was mentioning, the order is certainly an ancient one, but it's a very modern and needed and real one for the work of charity and spiritual growth that we provide for ourselves as members, and most importantly for the people that we serve. Let's see if I can get this to work. But in any event, I'll do this without this. Our history, as some of you know, is an ancient one. It's an history that began in the 11th century, so just over 900 years ago or so. And at the time, our founder, Blessed Gerard, was a Benedictine monk that came from Amalfi, Italy, just like myself. And in the monastery, he was the so-called hospitaller. So the hospitaller in the monastery had a very important role, because he and the people that coordinated and worked with him were in charge of welcoming the strangers, the foreigners, the people that were sort of in need of care. And so Blessed Gerard really grew in that hospitaller charism. And what he decided to do was to exit the monastery and founded his own community of brothers, religious brothers, the so-called Fras, the Fraters. And these brothers in the Holy Land, in Jerusalem, where our community was founded just over 900 years ago, were primarily knights that from mostly Europe were going on pilgrimage to the Holy Land to pray before the tomb of our Lord. So he gathered this community, and the center of the community was focused on providing care for the poor and the sick that would come to the Holy Land. And we can say now with certainty that our order is probably the first order that within the Catholic Church really fostered this idea of a charism of hospitality, religious hospitality. And after our order, some others, of course, came during the centuries and adopted the same charism that we established with great success, of course. So where does this bring us? Well, this brings us to pretty much today, where for over 900 centuries, our confreres have developed tremendous work throughout the world in the care of the poor, of the sick, by establishing hospitals, healthcare centers, and most importantly, providing for the neediest of all of us. So our charism of caring for the poor and the sick is a very much needed one nowadays. We are out there in the field, by definition as knights. We are not noble knights per se, but we are people that commit ourselves in various ways within our order to caring for the people that have nothing, that are left with nowhere to go, and no one is essentially looking after them or caring for them. So within our community, we have some of our members, and myself included, who have committed themselves in a most solemn way through religious vows to this mission, to this charism, to this cause. So we have within our community the so-called Fras, the Fratres, who are professed knights, and amongst us, of course, our beloved Grand Master, who comes from North America, is Canadian, but he spent 3 decades here in New York working as an attorney. And so we are, in a sense, the core of the order, to paraphrase or to really to use the words of the late Pope Benedict, we are the heart of the order, what makes the Order of Malta a religious order of the Catholic Church. And then over time, we have been blessed with tremendous riches by having many lay members, men and women, join our mission as knights and dames, and they have enriched us, and they contribute to our works and to our day-to-day mission, and really created the order of what it is today, which is an order of service, an order of charity, an order that is very much involved in the world, often in a very silent, discreet, reserved way, but a very effective and I should say important way. And our Association of Spiraler, Ken Craig, will certainly explain to us more of what the nature of our works is. So thank you very much for being with us this evening. We're very grateful that you have taken time out of a busy summer night to join us and to be curious about learning about our mission and our charism and our works. Thank you. So, Ken. You can do better than me in walking this thing. We're going to try. Let's see.
There we go. We'll see if that works. Continues working. So thank you, Fra Nicola. Nicola gave you an overview of the order's charism and sort of what it does at from an order perspective. Here in the American Association, which is largely the east coast of the United States and sort of the northeast side of things, because we have a group that's based down in Washington, D.C. called the Federal Association, and then the western half of the country is the Western Association. Within the American Association that we are all part of, there are 30 areas that we geographically break the group down into. Here in New York City, we have what we call the New York area. That covers the 5 boroughs, so a little bit more than the New York Archdiocese. And we're very pleased to have the current area chairs, Marietta and Michael Tempesta, and one of their sets of predecessors, although not the immediate predecessors, Camille and Rory Kelleher, that can provide some information later on if you have any questions. I guess the question that I get asked most frequently is, what is a hospitaller? It's a strange word. So no, we don't work in hospitals, but we do follow the dictate of Blessed Gerard, which was to show hospitality to people that are in need. I guess the most simple way to describe what a hospitaller does is we try to find things for the members to do. Our charism is not to be a fraternal organization that meets for cocktails and gets together for services. We're really meant to be known by the hands-on service that we provide to the poor and the sick and the work that we do to defend the faith. How do we do that? Well, we work actively with our members to listen to what they are hearing in their communities and what needs are relevant to them. We encourage our members to participate in the events that we hold and to find new things to do to assist the poor and the sick. We most especially ask them to support the things that we're already doing so that they keep going. And we look to establish partnerships with other groups. There's always a debate, how big should the order be? How big should the association be? I don't know the answer to that question, but I can tell you that if you need 100 people to do something, you can either have 100 members or you can have 10 members who know 90 other people that want to get involved and help participate. So we're always looking for people to help join us. We're always looking for people to help us serve the sick and the poor. And we do that by trying to establish partnerships with other groups. Some of you in the room are probably members of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre. You have been in contact with groups such as Legatus, which was mentioned earlier. There's the Venerable Order, which is the Order of St. John, and the Anglican/Episcopalian group. We try to partner with all of these groups because the poor and the sick really don't know religion. They just know need. And our main goal is to try to find ways to fill those needs. It's working. We break our works down into 2 broad categories, signature works and area works. So I'll start with the second. Area works are things that happen locally, and Francesca is going to talk in a couple minutes about the things that go on here in the New York City area. Signature works are more association-wide works that we do to try to help the sick and the poor consistently from the name of the work, but applied to the local needs of each area. What makes a work successful? The normal things that professionals would all understand. What's the objective? What does success look like? How do you measure success? Are there inherent risks which must be managed? Think about any of the projects or any of the things that young professionals get hit with at work day to day. We would ask the same of the works when they get started and as they continue to progress. Are we doing them well? Are we serving people? And is there anything that we could be doing differently? I think one of the things that we've tried most recently to instill in our members and the people that we work with is to use the Christogram IHS, which is normally referred to as the way to spell Christ's name, to remind people exactly what we're trying to do with our works. So IHS. We are trying to be impactful. It's not considered, in my opinion, to be a successful work if you do something and 3 people turn up and you don't really look like, you aren't perceived to be helping people and nobody really understands what you're trying to do. So we look for our works to have impact. Did it help someone? Did it make their lives better? Did it give them hope? Did it provide a glimmer of opportunity for them to be better off than they are today? H, hands-on. There are a lot of Catholic organizations that are very philanthropic and very service-focused, as in providing funding to other groups to do work. Our charism calls us to be hands-on. We're meant to be physically doing the work. So it's nice to write a check to a soup kitchen, but our charism calls on us to make the soup, serve the soup, clean up afterwards, and talk to the people that you're serving. And then lastly, sustainable, and this one is really important. Imagine you start a soup kitchen that serves 500 people on its first night. Well, you've hit impactful. You've had 35 members and 300 volunteers come and help you do that work. Well, that touches on hands-on. And then everybody goes home and forgets about it because there was no plan made to do it again next week or next month. If something is not sustainable, you might as well, if you're not going to make something sustainable, you might as well not start it in the first place. Because to be very, very honest, the people that you're serving, the poor and the sick, and the people that are looking for someone to help them be more life-focused are dependent on you to help them. And if you don't create works that are sustainable, you will leave people very disappointed and, quite frankly, more despondent than when they first came to you. Some examples of what we do. Come on. Good Lord. So I'm not going to go through all of the words on these pages because that will completely bore everyone, but I'm going to touch on each of these works because I think they give you a broad perspective of the varied things that we do. Malta Mobile Clinics. A couple years ago in the aftermath of the fires in California, the Western Association Group was loading up trucks with goods and taking them out to people that had lost everything in the fires, whether they were appliances, food, things like that. And what they started to realize was that on the way to and from the areas where the fires had impacted people, there were literally cities of homeless people sleeping on the sides of roadways and in abandoned fields. And they went out and they recognized that there was a need to serve these people because those guys, the people living in those camps, didn't have an opportunity to come into the main cities, to go to the soup kitchen, to go to the medical clinic. So they purchased a bunch of vans, loaded them up with various equipment, and started going out and visiting these groups. It has become known as the Malta Mobile Clinics. We have 3 that are operating, one in St. Louis, one in New Jersey, and the newest one in Detroit has just come online in the past couple months. To give you an idea of the impact that the one in St. Louis had, they originally thought this is going to be great. You know, we'll be able to go and pick up food from food distribution centers that are probably going to throw the food away, and we'll bring it to people that are in need. What they quickly realized was that there was a growing prison ministry need in St. Louis. People were being released from prison. They were, as you've seen in the movies, being led to the gate. The guards would open the gate, they'd be put outside, and they would hope for a bus to come by. That was the way they were released from prison. They started using the vans to go around and pick up gently used appliances, clothing, furniture, and working with the groups that help people try to reintegrate with society to set some of the released people up into apartments where they had clothing, furniture, and appliances. Imagine being released from prison after a period of time, served your time, trying to get back into society, and you're living in a one-room apartment with no furniture, with no appliances, and you don't have a job. The vans quickly became much more useful in helping people that came out of prison rebuild their lives. And in fact, 2 of the people that were released from prison several years ago are now running that part of the ministry, driving the van and connecting with other former prisoners. Flu vaccine clinics. Again, another nod from our Western Association friends. One of the things they were doing during the flu epidemic out in California, which occurred just after the fires, they were going out and giving flu shots. We've started doing the same here in New York. So, and this is an indication of, faith knows no boundaries, and it's not just about Catholicism. Steve Bueno, who is one of our knights here in New York, runs a program where in the fall we distribute flu vaccines to the homeless. Last year we did that at St. Francis down on 33rd Street, I think it is, or 32nd Street, at the Central Synagogue, in partnership with St. Patrick's at Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church, and at a clinic in New Jersey called St. John's Clinic, which is in Newark. In addition to the flu vaccines, they were given winter hats, gloves, socks, and gift cards for McDonald's. What we've learned through this process is that offering someone a flu vaccine, the homeless are probably going to walk by. When you talk about giving them socks and hats and gloves and the gift card, they will come over, they will talk to you, and then you can start to educate them on why the flu vaccine would be important. Our hope is to eventually increase this and be able to do the same with other vaccines and other medical needs that the homeless need on the streets. In Europe, the Order has for, I believe, over 40 years, hosted a camp for handicapped young adults in various countries. They move it around every year. It's challenging to bring handicapped young adults to Europe. They have medical needs. Some of them have mental health issues. They have unique personalities. We've started to have a camp here in the US. We've just finished our second one this past June up on the grounds of Siena College in Albany. We brought 30 handicapped young adults together for a week without their parents for fun, for some spirituality, for some independence, and for some friendship. And the idea is to create that community beyond the camp and keep the kids, or the young adults, I should say, together long after the camp. This has been a raging success. It is probably one of the fastest growing things that we've done. Just to give you an idea, some of the young adults that we have are people that at one time may have been in a home, but when they hit 18, the government funding and a lot of the insurance funding goes away, and they end up moving back home. In this case, they all moved back home. In some cases, handicapped young adults have to go into nursing homes. Nursing homes are exactly what we think they are. They're places where usually older people or very, very sick people go. There's a statistic that says that 37% of the young adults that get put into nursing homes because they age out of the facilities they were in die within 2 years. So focusing on this very underserved population of people is really important, and this camp is really helping to drive that. We mentioned the White Cross Ball earlier. Michael and Jason and the others that started the White Cross Ball have been very generous over the years in helping us get this camp up and running, and we're very, very appreciative for the work that they're doing. Migrant relief. So we in the Order of Malta try to stay away from politics as best we can. So regardless of one's opinion about what's going on at the border, there are people turning up in New York City each fall who traditionally live in places where they wear t-shirts and flip-flops and shorts, and they're completely unprepared for the winter. This past year, we started working with St. Joseph's bread line down on 33rd Street, I think. I always get the address wrong. And with a church in Queens to try to provide relief for the migrants. So we're not providing political asylum. We're not providing housing. We're providing things like diapers and baby food, clothing, warm coats, socks, hats, gloves, boots. I mean, some of these people are getting off these buses. They've never had a pair of boots because they didn't need them in their home country. And this migrant relief work has really started to become something that's very, very important and very, very needed, as you've been reading about in the newspapers. And again, regardless of what your view is of where the migrants came from and whether they should have been allowed in, they're here and they need to be taken care of. I don't know if I'm making this work or if there's somebody behind me doing it. Anti-human trafficking. I could go on about this all night. There's really three things that we're doing. In Connecticut, there is a home for women who have survived trafficking and are trying to build a new life. And the members of the Connecticut area do lots and lots of things with them. I will give you one example. This past Christmas, they went out and bought 3 or 4 Christmas trees, went around and had people donate gently used Christmas decorations and lights and all the stuff that, you know, every year we take the boxes out and we put the stuff back in the boxes and say someday we're going to get rid of that stuff. And they decorated the home with the women that had been trafficked. It was probably for some of those women the first time they had had outside contact beyond the counselors that they were working with since they were removed from the trafficking, the vicious cycle of trafficking. This is hands-on, really important work. We have also been working to establish what's called the, and I have to read it, the Protocol for Global Healthcare Providers. One of our members that's based between New York and Boston, Deborah Hauer-Ruskowski, has been leading this at the international level and has actually gotten to the UN and gotten the UN Commission to agree to put this on the table for a UN resolution. Effectively, what they're offering is training for healthcare professionals. So imagine you're a trafficked victim and the person that has been holding you captive realizes that you're sick. Well, you're not very valuable to them if you're sick. So they have no problem taking you to the emergency room, but they usually won't leave you alone. This program is trying to train the doctors and the nurses and the therapists in the ERs and the EDs across the country to recognize the signs that someone is being trafficked and to give them the skills that they need to be able to get that person alone, away from the person that's holding them in captivity, and try to find a way to get them out of that vicious cycle. This is an unbelievably successful project that was started here in the US at the international level by Deb and is making its way through the UN now. And then lastly, whoops, I went too far that time. Lastly, the O'Connell House. So O'Connell House is a home similar to the one that I mentioned in Connecticut that's currently being set up in outside of Boston to try to help house trafficked women. There is a statistic that I won't get completely right, but you'll get the scale of it. There are about 30 or 40,000 beds for people in this country that are sick in prisons. There are less than 300 beds for trafficked women. So across the entire country, there are only 300 beds for women that are trafficked. And there is a view that there's well over 30 or 40,000 trafficked women living in the United States, let alone the children and the men that are being victimized as well. O'Connell House is one of the first, what we hope will be a whole series of homes that are set up across the country. I've talked about a little bit, I mentioned earlier, prison ministry. One of the really great things that the Order has been doing for a very long time, and I believe it was Pope John Paul II that asked the Order to get involved in reaching out to prisoners. They've been working within and without the walls of the prisons to try to help those that are incarcerated. Whether it's bringing Bibles, whether it's helping them re-entry, whether it's working with their families to help accept them when they come back home, or whether it's simply just spending some time and being an ear to listen to the trials that they go through once they leave the prisons. The St. Bernadette Ministry. This is a new one that is starting slowly. Imagine you are a lonely, elderly person who's told that you have 3 months or 4 months or 6 months to live. You really don't have any family, and you really don't have anybody to help take care of you. That vulnerable population is very apt to be introduced to the concept of euthanasia or termination of their life. You should just go into hospice. It'll be easier for you. What the St. Bernadette Project is trying to do is reach out to those people and say to them, your life has value, and the fact that you don't have anybody to help take care of you, or you don't have family, you don't have siblings, you don't have children, we can help you make value of your life. And they work with them to gently try to encourage them to talk about their lives. Well, what did you do when you were a kid? Where did you live? Well, what did you do for a job? Well, what value did that have? And the goal is to produce a book that can be given to them that says, your life has value. It is unbelievably moving to see the transformation of some of these people who are still going to die in 3, 6, or 9 months, but to see that they're much happier about the way it's happening to them because they feel like they lived some value. They don't feel like their lives were worthless. And then the last thing that I will touch upon, the annual pilgrimage to Lourdes. So for almost 40 years, the Order of Malta has been joining with the International Order to take the sick to Lourdes in France. Annually, we take 50 terminally ill or handicapped people and their caregivers, a team of 30 doctors and nurses, and then a team of about 300 knights and dames on a chartered 747 from, well, hopefully back in New York, to Lourdes in France for a week of socializing, service work that the knights and dames do to take care of the people that we bring. We refer to them as malades. And then some spirituality with masses and services and anointing and visiting the grotto. If anyone ever wants to see the Order of Malta at work, at its best, come on the Lourdes pilgrimage. It absolutely explains in very visible, hands-on ways what the Order of Malta is about and the work that we try to do. That's sort of the national level. At this time, I'd like to invite Francesca to come up and talk to you about what goes on here in New York.
Just a little shorter there. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Frau Nicola. So my goal for the next 10 or so minutes, going to try to get everyone to do just a little bit of their own reflection. I think we've done a good job of kind of spelling out the different ways that you could get involved, but I'd like for us to kind of see ourselves in some of the works of the order. So just the first very simple question, what does it mean to be called to serve as a young professional? We talk about the idea of service. We, spend our time all day, every day at work. But how do we really find the time to give back and to serve? And then more specifically, what does that really mean within New York City? Busy schedules, conflicting interests. How do we really, find the time? And that's really a question that I get over and over, especially when I'm meeting new volunteers. How do you really find the time to serve? Where do you really fit it in? Life kind of flies by, but how do we really find the time and dedicate that time to service? In the beginning, Frau Nicola did a great job just explaining overall the charism of the order. And that's really just a very simple call for caring for the sick and protecting the poor as well. So as Hospitaller, in the overall sense, my goal and my job is to find programs and to find initiatives that really speak to the works of that charism. So for me, that's my primary focus, and that's what I'm going to touch on for the activities that we have within the New York City area. So something that really resonated with me recently is a quote I stumbled upon from Pope Francis. And very simple message here, but it's easy to delegate charity to others, yet the calling of every Christian is to become personally involved. So how do we find our own personal cause and our own personal mission within some of these works, and what does that mean for us? How do we, again, find the time? So for us, it's a choice. It's a choice to serve. It's a choice to give service. It's a choice to find the time. So I'm going to go through the opportunities that we have to serve, and again, try to find yourself within these opportunities. I see a lot of familiar faces. I think some people have come out and volunteered before, but it's again trying to give you some of that information and then figuring out how we can engage you again. So how do we make the choice and the conscious choice to actually serve others? And for me, it's a pretty simple answer, and it's just a matter of getting started. So sometimes people feel like serving is a really large, very, almost philosophical thing that they're trying to achieve. It's this thing out there, I want to find the time to volunteer. I want to do it very consistently. And I find volunteers, sometimes they come for 3 months in a row, and, I might not see them again for several months, but it just didn't fit in their schedule. But they, again, at some point came back to it because it made sense for them in their life, and they circle back for it. And that's fine, because it's all about what's finding what works for you. So you can commit an hour here, commit an hour there. It's all a personal choice. So some of the actual details of what we have going on in New York, specifically in New York City area, Malta Walks. Malta Walks for me is something, I've been doing it for probably the last 10 or so years. It's one of the most straightforward ways that you could get involved. Some pictures from our past events, but it's quite simple. We make sandwiches and we assemble bags, toiletry kits, and then we just walk the streets of New York engaging with the homeless. So it's a really nice hands-on activity. I'd like to think that it fits all of Ken's criteria for service. And it's something that we do once a month out of St. Patrick's Cathedral. Our nursing home visits, we're involved with two of the bigger nursing homes here in New York, TCC and Mary Manning Walsh. Every Sunday, we're serving at both of those nursing homes where you can visit with the residents of the nursing home, bring them to and from Mass, and make some real, very nice, genuine personal connections with the residents at the nursing homes. Supplies for migrants, Ken touched on that. We had two pretty lengthy Amazon lists that went out to our membership, and we supplied diapers, baby strollers. It was a very easy way for people that maybe couldn't come make a physical contribution. They just clicked add to cart, and the supplies arrived to Father Cavoto, and he was really very happy with the amount of people that we were able to help. Ministry work within our hospitals. We have Eucharistic ministers that go out to some of the New York hospitals. So that's something that people could do one-on-one. And Ken touched on this, but the flu vaccine clinics led by Steve Bueno happen every fall. So again, a very hands-on, boots on the ground way that we're out and in the community. So that's just the overall of what we have in New York City. And then I wanted to hit on what we have coming up for the fall. It's everything that I just mentioned, plus everything that's here up on the slide. Thursday, September 14th, we have Solemn Vespers and Benediction. Another flu clinic will be for September 28th, and then another one on October 25th. And then the TCC Circus at the Specialty Hospital up in East Harlem. It's a very special event where we put on a beautiful circus for the local, for the residents of that nursing home, a lot of children who that's their permanent home, a really moving experience. So that is definitely one that I would encourage folks to attend. And then the White Cross Ball, our annual fundraiser is coming up in early November, on November the 3rd at the Metropolitan Club. I think tickets are already on sale. If you sign up for the email alerts, you can go ahead and buy your ticket. So that's everything I had in terms of New York City, but I just want to just circle back very quickly that all of these are events that are available. It's a full calendar, but it's really important to find yourself in the service and to find yourself in what makes sense for you. An hour here, an hour there. It's really about finding what's best for your schedule and for you, and that's how you can get started on your journey for service. So with that, I'm going to bring up James, and he's going to talk about the UN.
Thank you, guys, for giving that. I'm going to give an overview of our activities at the UN and how the diplomatic activities, and with some of my colleagues behind who will go into more further detail around the other organs at the UN that we represent. So, as Fra Nicole has said, we are a religious order, however, we are also a sovereign state. We're recognised by 112 nations and occupy a special observer status at the United Nations, a similar status that's enjoyed by the Holy See. In Rome, on the Via Conduct and on the Aventine Hills, you'll find the centre of our government, where our head of state, Fra John, the Grand Master, lives and works, and where our administrative infrastructure, involving several hundreds of full-time staff, where our foreign minister, our finance minister, and minister of health, as well as our prime minister, along with a number of regional desk officers, perform their daily functional activities. Almost 30 years ago, we were given a special status at the UN and have full-time ambassadors serving in Geneva, Nairobi, Vienna, and here in New York, along with ambassadors accredited to each one of those 112 countries. So, what does this really mean? Enjoying the diplomatic status that we at that house enable us to have more effective conduct in the international outreach. As our ambassadors, by virtue of their status, they have the highest level of government. They have the highest level form of government in each which country they serve. This enables us to cut through the red tape, bring our concerns and sometimes our problems to those who can best help serve. Examples of this have been in recent, as you've seen with Ukraine. We've been very effective with regards to the floods in Pakistan. Having these ambassadors in each one of these countries allows us to have a diplomatic arm to the order. I'm going to show a short video of our main activities that we've served at both the Security Council, the General Assembly and Third Committee. Hopefully gives a better overview.
Concomitant with all of that is the need to acknowledge from our perspective the importance of faith-based communities in a world where it is estimated that almost 80% of our fellow humans have a religious or a sectarian commitment.
There is no tool for development more effective than the education of girls. If we are to succeed in our efforts to build a more healthy, peaceful and equitable world, the classrooms of the world have to be full of girls as well as boys.
Firstly, our humanitarian efforts in the Middle East are extensive, with multiple clinics, hospitals and healthcare facilities. In response to the growing needs and regional upheaval and conflict, we have a prominent role serving displaced communities in refugee camps in Syria, Jordan and Lebanon. In Palestine, the Holy Family Hospital in Bethlehem, run by our order, stands out as a source of hope, offering comprehensive medical care and services to a geographically diverse, yet largely impoverished community. It holds immense significance for us at the Sovereign Order of Malta because we have diligently dedicated ourselves to providing humanitarian care and medical service to the poor and sick across the globe for 900 years. Operating in 122 countries and holding bilateral diplomatic relations with 114, we have a special focus on the Middle East and Africa, providing humanitarian aid through healthcare, WASH, disaster preparedness, and food security.
Hello, my name is Zachary Munoz. I'm a seminarian for the Archdiocese of Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine. And I am here to talk to you a little bit about the General Assembly and the Security Council, which the Order of Malta participates in. As James mentioned, the General Assembly is 192 sovereign states, plus the Holy See and Palestine. And the real purpose of the General Assembly is to give a general consensus of the ideas in which the sovereign states are promoting and where they want to go. So the way that they do that is they tend to vote on various resolutions. While those resolutions aren't binding as they are in the Security Council, these resolutions give an idea of where in the world the intent, the desire of the various nations is to be directed. Other ways in which they do that is by voting in various positions like the Security Council members. Now with that, the Security Council is a bit unique in that it represents 15 members, 5 of which are permanent, 10 are non-permanent. The 5 permanent members are representative of the victors of World War II. So the United States, United Kingdom, France, the Russian Federation, and China. I remembered it. I was nervous I wasn't going to. The other 10 represent various areas around the world, the Africas, the Americas, Asia. And the real purpose there, the five members have what's called veto power. Veto power means that even if all of the other members vote for a resolution, the permanent member can veto any resolution, no matter what, with whatever intent or purpose that they have behind that. With that, the question then becomes, well, what happens regarding a resolution that the Security Council has brought forward that's been vetoed? Well, there's a mechanism where that then gets pushed back to the General Assembly, and the 192 nations then can dialogue and discuss it. The other 10 members, they don't have veto power, but what they're there to do is to steward the consensus of the other nations, to really present and advocate for worldwide peace and security. And that's the whole purpose of the Security Council, is to maintain peace and security in the world. The ways in which they do that is diplomatic or economic sanctions. In really serious situations, the Security Council can authorize military force to really ensure peace and security in conflict zones, to maintain neutrality and various things, to really take that idea of, why is the Sovereign Order of Malta participating at the UN in this way? I think as we're talking about the idea of the virtue of charity, what is charity? Charity is the reception of the other as yourself. The way in which we image God the Father, one way, or we image the Trinity in one way, is that we're relational beings, we're personal, is the Father looks at the Son and loves the Son, gives himself to the Son returns, reciprocates that self-donative act, and the Holy Spirit is the love between them. The Order of Malta, and the way in which we participate, is really to image that, to see the other as ourselves. As the members have mentioned, our people are the lost, the broken, the forsaken, the homeless. As Jesus says, what you have done to the least of these, you've done for me. And really that's what the order is attempting to do. Ways in which we participate, as we've spoken 40 times before the General Assembly. We've spoken 3 times before the Security Council, recently twice in the last month, as well as the Emergency Council sessions that have been brought forward regarding the Russian-Ukrainian war. And that's all I have, and I will pass it to Costanza.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, James, for the kind introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Costanza Lucci. I'm one of the advisors at the mission of the Sovereign Order of Malta to the United Nations. I'm here to give you a brief overview of our work within the General Assembly. Specifically, our mission is involved in one of its 6 committees, in particular the 3rd committee, which is also known as the Social, Humanitarian, and Cultural Committee. The main role of this committee is to basically work on any human rights issues around the world. This includes discussion on topics such as the civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights, and the rights of specific groups of people such as women, children, indigenous people, and migrants. Another category is social development, especially poverty eradication and equitable access to education, healthcare, and social services. It also includes humanitarian affairs. Specifically, the 3rd committee discusses and coordinates effort to provide humanitarian assistance and respond to humanitarian crises, including natural disaster, conflicts, and other emergencies. And it also examines the ways to strengthen international cooperation and addressing these challenges. It also has the goal of promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women are central theme of the 3rd committee. Discussions usually include the efforts to eliminate discrimination, promote women's rights, and enhance women's participation in all aspects of society. 2 other points, very important, are cultural issues, especially those matters related to cultural diversity, intercultural and interreligious dialogues, and the preservation of cultural heritage. And the last point is health and disabilities, and the 3rd committee mostly discuss health-related issues, including access to healthcare services, disease prevention, and the rights of persons with disabilities. It explores ways to improve global health and ensure the well-being of all individuals, and this is why the Order of Malta is so involved in this, in order to provide all countries with the work that we do. And with that, I leave the word to my colleague, Letitia.
Hello, my name is Letizia Schoenberg, and thank you, Costanza. I'm a diplomatic trainee at the mission, and I just want to quickly touch on again, the humanitarian works of the Order worldwide. So the Malteser Internationals rooted their values of compassion and solidarity, and the Order of Malta have worked tirelessly to provide aid to vulnerable populations worldwide. The Order of Malta focuses on medical and social care, running hospitals, clinics, and shelters for the homeless, while Malteser International specializes in disaster response, healthcare, and community development. Their combined efforts have delivered essential medical services, clean water, emergency relief, and sustainable development projects to countless communities in need. One of the biggest projects is the Holy Family Hospital in Bethlehem, Palestine, which stands as a beacon of hope for families in the Bethlehem region, including refugee camps and remote desert villages. The hospital and its outreach clinics have impacted more than 1 million lives since 1990. As the second largest employer in Bethlehem, the hospital also plays a crucial stabilizing role in the community, providing jobs to over 174 Palestinian families and creating employment opportunities for women in areas where few exist. And the Order of Malta's emergency aid and relief operations help to respond to acute crises triggered by events such as armed conflicts, natural disasters, and droughts. And the organization provides emergency relief supplies, clean water, food, deliveries, and medical care to affected communities. And the coordination of aid is carried out by experienced experts who assess the needs of the affected regions, manage emergency forces, and coordinate with other relief organizations. So this is important, for example, in Ukraine right now. So Malteser International is in cooperation with Malteser Ukraine, which has been spearheading the distribution of vital relief goods, including food, medical supplies, and consumables in war-affected communities in eastern and southern Ukraine. Thank you.
It's me again. So, thank you. And thank you to all of you. Thank you, Nicola, Ken, Francesca, and James. What I'd like to do now is kind of you did such wonderful overviews of your work both globally, nationally, locally. Want to do a little deeper dive, just for a handful of questions, just about 4 questions about the virtue of charity, as that is kind of the pillar virtue that this particular event is built around. And while we're talking, I would invite you to come up with some questions of your own. We'll open the floor in a couple of minutes. There's a mic on house left over there. So perhaps the first order of business should be a basic question of definition. Now, the ancient Greeks had 4 different words for love. And in Christian tradition, love and charity have kind of been interchangeable. But in our modern parlance, love is often used in all sorts of ways. You hear phrases, I love your hair, I love those shoes, I love that sushi restaurant, I love Taylor Swift. But the virtue of charity is a very particular kind of love. And I know Father did a wonderful brief overview of that. But how would each of you, in simplest terms, define charity? And I toss this to all of you, whoever wants to start. Not everyone has to answer. Don't worry, I don't want to put anyone on the spot there. But if anyone has any thoughts of how one could simply define charity to the ordinary person in the street.
Thank you. That's a very good question. So the first thing that comes to mind is really what charity is within the context of the order, which is our charism and mission. And that goes back, I would suggest, to the idea of hospitality. So hospitality, as intended by our founder, Blessed Fra Gerard, really meant welcoming. And welcoming in the sense of being open to everyone, no matter where they're from, no matter what their creed, no matter what their nationality, and being able to serve them. Serve them in their needs, serve them spiritually. That's, I think, what the difference is between our order and other very good humanitarian organizations that operate quite successfully throughout the globe, is that the foundation of our service is a spiritual one. And so I would propose that for us as members of the order, charity is really throwing our arms open to the neediest of people, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, in a way that is naked, in a way that is sort of blind to, to their origin. And that's, what I think is our definition of charity.
I think for me it's looking into someone's eyes and seeing yourself, and then trying to figure out how to treat that person in the same way you would like to be treated, regardless of their background or their views or where they came from or what they represent. We talked a little bit, somebody mentioned in the discussion on the UN, Holy Family Hospital. So Holy Family Hospital recently, in Bethlehem, recently celebrated the 100th birth at the hospital. And if my statistics, well, I'll go on the conservative side. I think it's a fair estimate to say that 95% of those babies were not Christian. 1,000? Okay. That's really important. So the people that are working in that hospital, Holy Family Hospital, clearly a Christian hospital, sponsored and run by the Order of Malta, is looking into the eyes of the people that have a need, and they're responding to that need regardless of the background and where they came from or what their means are. That's what charity means to me.
Yeah, I think in the most simple way, I would say it's really about humility, and it's about humbling yourself enough to not look past someone else and bring yourself down to even an equal level or lower level so that you can really give of yourself. And so it's recognizing that internally, and then taking a piece of yourself and sharing it, not just looking past another person.
That's beautiful.
I think from my point of view, going off the back of Ken's, is from what we see on a daily basis at the United Nations, is the people we really represent are the people that are the forgotten people, and that is the basis of what I would classify as charity. It's the people who have no hope, and we're there to help in any way possible, regardless of race, religion, and to go from there.
I think collectively that's a pretty good definition. And I think if I would summarize, Pope Francis has a beautiful definition. He says charity is seeing others through the eyes of Jesus. I mean, that's pretty much encapsulates so much of what you said. Now, as I said, your presentations spoke about how the charitable works were foundational to the founding of the order back in the 11th century, and all these wonderful opportunities, again, globally, nationally, locally, that the order makes available to people today in the 21st century. But as the old saying goes, charity starts at the home. So how would you, based on your experience, globally, nationally, locally, give some of the folks gathered here tonight ways of embodying that virtue of charity, even in small ways, with the most local community, the people you live with, your coworkers, the people you ride the bus with in the morning. Any thoughts on that?
I think that there's a version of everything that we went over today that could be brought back into the home. Even just taking a simple gathering, at someone's apartment where you make the sandwiches together for the homeless and then you distribute them. There's kind of a version where you find your part in some of those larger works, and you see how you could do it together. And I think that the easiest way to do it is just to invite people over and share some food and throw some ideas around, because once you get the conversation going, people can kind of contribute to the discussion. So if people are in the discussion, they might have an opinion, and if they're not, it's an easy way to gather everyone around and kind of get that conversation going.
to give a sort of an international perspective on that, our associations throughout the world really helps us at the UN. So our different associations, an example of that I could give is in Albania we have a program. It's called Old for Gold, and we support around 65% of their elderly population on a monthly basis, just caregiving. So that's on a sort of international perspective. But going back to what Francesca said, that's here at home as well. But have that outreach globally.
Sure, absolutely.
I think I'd suggest, first off, put yourself out. So find time to do a number of different things, whether it's, let's talk about the things that Francesca mentioned, going to Terence Cardinal Cook or Mary Manning Walsh, participating in the Malta Walks, volunteering at a flu clinic. Put yourself out and make time to be able to do those things. And then do a number of them until you find one that you can be really passionate about. You know, a volunteer who's not enthusiastic is kind of a detriment to what you're doing. If you can find one of those, maybe it'll be the third, the fifth, the ninth thing that you do. If you feel passionate about it, then put all of your energies and attention into doing that, because that will give you the most reward, and I think it will give the most benefit and the most reward to the people that you're serving.
Again, it reminds me of Pope Francis often talks about that he doesn't trust charity that doesn't cost you something, that doesn't hurt a little bit. Archbishop Sheen, who our center is named after, had once said that charity isn't measured by what you give away, it's what you hold back. And time is, you know, you all spoke about, you know, whether it was boots on the ground or investment. It's not just about writing a check and sending it somewhere, it's about being involved. So I think that's important, and thank you all for sharing that. You know, several polls have shown an alarming trend in, you spoke about millennials and Zoomers, Gen Zers, that they're increasingly drifting away from religion. And some polls show that because of that, they're less likely to be engaged in volunteering or charitable work. But other polls show that that demographic really value social engagement and trying to make a positive difference in the world. One recent poll showed that one of the reasons why they're abandoning faith is because they feel that organized religion hurts more than helps society. So I'm wondering, when you take that passion for making the world a better place, social engagement, do you think the virtue of charity and the charitable work of the church could be a real opportunity for engaging that demographic and, you know, encouraging them into that dialogue? Again, I go back to Pope Francis a lot, where he said that practicing charity is the best way to evangelize. So can you talk about your experiencing and maybe engaging that younger generation that, for whatever reason, is drifting away from the church?
Thank you. I think that what that generation, and really all generations, are looking for the most is to see a real witness, a real testimony. And by that I mean that when you are facing, you know, for example, what we do in Lourdes or what we do at, you know, in these various centers, or really what the church does in a very beautiful and powerful way in a number of settings, you see that very powerful witness of charity, which really is the best example of what our faith is about. So as a young person of that generation that is sort of curious but is quite unsure and perhaps even doubtful as to his or her faith, once you see those examples of true witness, then I think, you know, your heart is going to melt in a way, and in a way you see that powerful image of the Lord, of our teachings, of the gospel, all embodied in that beautiful virtue of love, which is charity.
I think it was attributed to St. Francis, who said, preach the gospel constantly, use words only when necessary. So it's that idea of modeling that. And going back to the earliest centuries of the church, I think it was Tertullian who said that the pagans would look at the early Christians and they would say, those Christians, how they love each other. That's what attracted people to the early church, and that's hopefully what attracts people to the church now.
There's a a legend, I guess it is, because I don't know that there's any fact to back it up, but there's a very long-held legend that when Blessed Gerard first started offering his hospitality to people in Jerusalem, the local Muslim rulers of the time, because this is all before the Crusades, got a little bit irritated and a little bit anxious because this monk was kind of becoming pretty popular and people were starting to like him. And word got back to the Caliph in Egypt. And on his next visit to Jerusalem, he went to this so-called hospice to see what this monk was doing. And the way the legend goes, was so humbled that he had a parchment written up that was nailed over the door of the hospital, basically saying, don't bother this guy, he's doing a good job. Because when the Caliph went in, there were Jews, there were Christians, there were Muslims all being taken care of. It's kind of viewed as being the first license from a government official to operate a hospice or a hospital. And I think there was no religion involved in that. It's not like Gerard was preaching. He was doing what he was called to do, which was to serve people that were sick. The witness part of it is what helped get the permission to be able to run and the protection that they needed to run the hospice. So I think living the values, and if you have a niece or a nephew or a cousin or a relative who's not going to church anymore, trying to get them to go back to church is not really the way to get them back into the church. Take them to do the service work that you're doing and introduce them to the charity that we're doing, or that you're doing. And I think that will be a better way to get them back into, well, maybe I will go with you on Sunday before you go to that clinic or before you go visit those people in the hospital, because that's how you seem to do it. And through that charity and through those works, you'll be able to bring them back, hopefully.
Now, to that point, it would be arrogant to assume that, religious communities of whatever tradition have a monopoly on charity. As you alluded to, there's many secular charities that do tremendous work, but as you said, driven from a more humanitarian motive. However, what I think religious organizations get, particularly Christian Catholic organizations, is that they understand that charity is offering more than just material needs, as important as those needs are. As Pope Benedict wrote in his beautiful encyclical about charity, God is love, that love of neighbor is always grounded in love of God. And as Mother Teresa said, we sometimes think that poverty is only about being hungry, naked, and homeless, but there's a poverty of being unwanted, unloved, uncared for. That's the greatest poverty. So in your experiences, can you talk a little bit about addressing those types of needs through acts of charity, and either that or the need for developing prayer life to have a truly effective charitable outreach?
I can take it from how I've seen from, again, using the worldwide associations. The number of volunteers in each association that when a certain disaster hits, and the amount of volume of people we see come together just to help in that specific area is tremendous. And that happens throughout every single association we have throughout the world, regardless of what disaster is there. And then we work with our NGOs and our international aid agency, Malta International, to help those volunteers on the ground. But without them on the ground, we'd be so much less effective.
And sadly, there's no shortage of those types of disasters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I think one of the most specific examples I could give of the two coming together, on our walks, on our outreach, we often will have a moment where we do stop and pray together. And so it's kind of not really a forced moment, but it's something almost natural that happens, where we're out doing a work of service, but we're also bringing in that spiritual prayer aspect as well.
Well, just for my final question, speaking of disasters on a global scale, we all have just lived through a historic pandemic, and that affected everyone. I mean, we experienced it in a particular way here in New York City, where we witnessed great darkness, but we also witnessed great light in seeing the best of humanity, people rising to the occasion in small acts of charity and very heroic acts of charity. By those unsung heroes that Pope Francis beautifully calls the saints next door. I know we're talking about charity tonight, not the virtue of hope. That'll be the next event. But from your vantage point, again, globally, nationally, locally, internationally, can you just maybe think for a moment about one experience that you witnessed, some act of charity during that, the recent pandemic, that really gave you hope?
I mean, I can take this personally because of how I became involved with the order. I was in the UK when the pandemic hit, and there was a huge shortage of PPE, protection equipment for doctors and nurses. I had a number of people I went to university with who are now doctors and nurses. And my family business in the textile industry. And we created a firm that essentially had volunteers throughout the whole of the UK to produce these scrubs to deliver to doctors. And from the back of that, I then worked with the order. At that time, it was with the explosion that happened in Beirut in Lebanon, to then send the excess supplies we had over there to help there. So that's how I got involved in the diplomatic corps, purely off the back of that creation. So for me, that's a personal,
Very personal
connection there.
Yeah.
I think one thing that really happened in COVID for the order is we didn't stop. And so that for me was, when I say we didn't stop our in-person, we did a lot of our events outside, but we just kept going with our charism, even in COVID. And so that for me showed me the hope of our order and the spirit of our commitment to what we were doing, because we did forge through even in the circumstances of COVID.
So in the depths of the lockdown and the isolationism and all the ugly stuff that went on with COVID, even for people that didn't come down with the illness, there was a lot of loneliness. And we, across the association, started what we called the Sunday Rosary. So at, I think it was 7 p.m. on a Sunday evening, we set up a Zoom call and anyone could dial in and we would pray the Rosary together. You couldn't leave your house, you couldn't go to church, people weren't even receiving the sacraments, but you could get on as a community and have a little bit of socializing in the format of everybody on the screen saying the Rosary. And what evolved out of that was the spiritual side, and it was great for our members, and they invited some of their friends and their family. But one of the really nice things that came out of that I learned later on was that it made people realize that there were other people sitting at home that weren't listening into the Rosary that had no contact that night. And it may have been the only contact, the person that was on for the Rosary. So people started calling their neighbors and started calling other people from their parishes. And a whole little cottage ministry, if you like, started by just calling people and saying, hey, I'm here, hello, how are you? Have you talked to anybody this week? For me, that gave hope that, out of all of that darkness and the isolation, that people could start to realize that, wow, I'm like this now just because of COVID, but the lady that lives next door has been like this for the last 10 years and nobody ever calls her and nobody ever sees her. And I think that was eye-opening for a lot of people, again, to look into the eyes of people and see what they needed and then try to do something and take some action on the back of it.
I think that what happened, personally for me and maybe a few of my friends that I witnessed is that the pandemic humbled ourselves. So in a way that I realized that you really have to trust in the Lord's providence on a number of ways, whether it's, food or activities, anything that, that goes on in life. So that the charity, I think, has been a sense of humbling, a sense of letting go, and really putting your trust in the Lord. So that I think had the effect of opening the heart. And the fruits of that, I think, is what Ken, Francesca, and that we just discussed. I think that's how it all came out very well.
Beautifully said. I'd like to open the floor now to questions if anyone has them out there. Again, there's a microphone just so we can hear, but if anyone would like to move over there with a question, please feel free. The only charitable request we have is to please phrase it in the form of a question.
Hello, thank you. My question is about mission and indifference, because we were introduced to the history by the origins of the Knights with Blessed Gerard, and you just mentioned how it began, even before the Crusades. And so it was also mentioned that hospitality came from Gerard, who was a Benedictine monk, and so it strikes me that that's central to the rule of Saint Benedict, but he felt a specific call of mission to go sort of beyond the boundary of that original rule to found the new order. And then obviously when you have the Crusades that then follow later, you have an order which is allowed to operate in different environments that were already from the beginning transnational, and in the midst of areas of crises. So my question then about indifference is that when you see the secular structures changing, not only when it comes to Islam and Christianity at the political order, but secularization, being able to operate within these, in the midst of these institutions, like at the UN, there's always the risk. I mean, the Holy Father talks about spiritual mundanity, the risk of that, of spiritual worldliness. And so what are sort of the reflections that go into deciding whether or not a work is worthwhile in the spirit of Christian charity, or whether you should let some other people write the checks for one thing, and what's the sort of discernment process there?
So go ahead. No, I think that what you just said at the very end, discernment, that's the first thing that we should all engage in when we decide how we apply ourselves and what causes we support and how do we get involved. And what Blessed Gerard did, which was very innovative for his time, in fact, it's really the first example that we can think of a religious, a monk doing that. He really moved out of the monastery, he moved out of the convent into the world. And he brought the virtue of charity through hospitality in a larger setting. So we as Catholics, we as members of the Order of Malta, we operate in the world, and we try to be witnesses of our virtues in the world, in this case in the secular world, because that's the reality of what's around us. So whether it's the UN, whether it's our job, whether it's our favorite charities, our social activities, whatever. So what we witness, who we are, is to present in our milieu, in our midst, this virtue of charity through hospitality, and that's our charism.
I think as we approach the evaluation of an idea to do something like a new work, and then the ongoing evaluation of whether or not it's those three things that I mentioned, is it impactful, is it hands-on, and is it sustainable? I think there's a level of practicality that we always have to have when we look at things. If somebody came to me tomorrow with a great idea that we should start training dogs for the blind, I would tell them, great, and I would look up the Society for the Blind that gives out the dogs, and I would put them in touch with them and say, go do it, because there's already a group doing that. They do it very well. We should support it. If that's your passion, if that's what you want to get involved in, please go ahead and do it. But it's not a space that we're going to necessarily be able to make a huge impact without, one, disenfranchising a group that's already doing it, but secondly, spending an awful lot of money and probably not doing it as well as they do because they've been doing it for so long. So when people come to me at the national level with ideas for new works, I try to ask them the IHS questions, but also, is there anybody else doing it? And if there is, should we partner with them? Is there a value that we can bring to a partnership that they don't necessarily have on their own, and we would be additive and creating more benefit by doing a partnership? But there's always a level of practicality. I think I said it earlier when I had the slide up. How do you know that a work is successful? It's the same questions that you ask when you're doing a project at work or when you're looking at your investment account. Is this investment strategy working? What's not working about it? Is there something else I should be doing? Is there a factor that's happening, that's influencing the results that sit outside of my space and I have no control over it? And should I be thinking about managing risks in a different way? It's all part of the same practical approach to looking at whether or not something is working.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Oh.
Hello. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Yeah, thank you all panelists here, because I think in your words you've expressed that not only do we treat our fellow man as we would want to be treated ourselves, but that in their faces, in the face of the homeless, the disenfranchised, the disabled, migrant, we see the face of Christ himself calling us to help and to serve him. In the homeless, in the disabled, we serve Christ himself. However, what happens when a motion isn't carried in the UN, or a project fails, or that merely a homeless person rejects the medical or help that is offered to them? What happens when there is failure in certain aspects of your mission? How do each one of you as knights and dames of the order and the order itself react to that?
You know, just in terms of the homeless outreach, that's a very real occurrence that does happen. You know, we will, on any given walk, have someone who turns down the bag and turns down the food. And we always tend to approach it the exact same way, which is in the kindest way, to be honest. I mean, that's part of what happens on any given month, but it's nothing that makes us feel like it's a setback. We just continue on to serve the next person who's, you know, in the right headspace to maybe even accept the bag. So that does happen in a real way, but we definitely wouldn't take that necessarily as a failure.
From a UN point of view, in terms of when there's huge natural disasters or conflict areas, we're a part of a cluster group with other, International Blue Crescent, Red Cross, ourselves, and we'll have different areas that we specialise at what we're good at serving. In terms of people actually refusing service, in those areas, we tend not to actually experience it because of the dire situation in it. But if we did, we would try everything in our might to help the people, because at the end of the day, we serve the sick and the poor.
For me, I think it's putting egos aside and having some.
Sorry about that.
Yikes. It's putting egos aside and having some humility when you take a step back and look at something that's been, whether it's been running for a week, a month, a year, and you ask the question, are we adding any value here? I think sometimes egos, and I didn't use the words, or read the words, but it was on the slide. What makes the work successful? Putting your ego aside and being humble about it, and being willing to ask the question, is this working? And ask someone else, do you think it's working? And learning from it. There might be, it might be the case that you say, we tried this, it didn't work for whatever reason, and we should move on and do something else. Or what we intended to do isn't happening, but there's these other things that are happening, and we should focus on those. But I do think, as Francesca said, it's a much more difficult problem when someone that you're trying to reach out to rejects the help. The only thing you can do is try and try again.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Juan Telles Sandoval. Thank you for coming here. I have a very superficial question, but a lot of the media attention and popular culture focuses on the Order of Malta's most glamorous elements, such as being part of the UN as its own sovereign nation, and the number of royals and nobles that are in the order. And I believe that the Grand Master right now is the first one to be not a member of nobility. Can you talk about the relationship between these factors and the order today?
I guess maybe the most simple answer is, I think the order is trying to get everyone to realize that we all put our pants on the same way, whether we're noble or not. And I think some of the historical focus on the nobility and the non-nobility, here in the United States, we don't have nobility. We kind of rejected that a couple hundred and some odd years ago. And as a result, we've not let that get in the way. Now, there's other things that have replaced nobility. But we've been making a huge effort over the last, I would say, 25 or 30 years, long before I got involved, to kind of put some of that stuff aside and to focus on the work that needs to be done and how it can best be done. I was introduced to somebody when I was in Lourdes, waiting to go into one of the Basilica Masses. This guy came up to me and said, would you mind if my group went in a little bit ahead of yours? And we talked about it. Yeah, fine, you can go in. Somebody came up to me afterwards and said, do you know who that was? And I said, no. Well, that was Lord Freddie Windsor. He's one of the Queen's nephews or nieces or grandchildren, whatever. I said, oh my God, I didn't know. They said, yeah, you wouldn't know because he never introduces himself as anything other than Freddie. So it's funny. And he's been coming to Lourdes for about 10 years. I said, well, that's interesting because I've never seen him before, and we work very closely with the English Association. And he said that's because he spends all of his time in the hospital. He rarely comes out of the hospital. He works for 8 or 10 hours in the hospital, then he goes back to sleep, then he goes back to the hospital on a rotating. And I think that's what we're trying to focus on, is the work that people do as opposed to the background and where they came from. And the media doesn't help, because every once in a while there's a funny story and they like to blow it up and, you know, Lord this or Lady that, or, you know, the Duke of this did this or that, whatever. Like, there's 13,000 other members that are working really hard with or without titles, and that's what we're trying to get people to focus on.
Yeah, my experience has been that when you become a member of the order, you leave all that behind you. You know, whether a member of royalty, or whether you are a lawyer, or whether you are a doctor, whatever. And the common denominator is exactly what Ken said, is that you put on your robes and you become a witness to charity. And that's all that there is to it. And that happens in Lourdes at the pilgrimage, that happens on retreats, that happens you know, when we go out to have a drink together or a meal together, and many of us are good friends with each other and whatnot. So, you know, we really don't see each other as, quite frankly, as that glamorous, to be honest with you. But we see each other as people, as confrères, as, most importantly, as human beings that felt called to be witnesses to a charism and to do work. And yes, it's a beautiful thing that we have a Grand Master that comes from North America, but he's a Grand Master, and most of us are very close friends to him, of great nobility of heart. And you know, just being able to see his example on a day-to-day basis, at least when he's here in New York with us, it's not only refreshing, but quite frankly, inspirational. And so, yes, his election that took place on May the 3rd, which I think was quite discussed on the media. I know Ken and I and a few others were present that day. You know, really was extremely powerful, because he showed what I think Ken and I myself are trying to say, which at the end of the day, what unites us is not, you know, the way somebody is born, but it's really the way somebody lives. And in choosing this specific Grand Master, I think that the Order of Malta as a whole made that very clear, that that's the way that we want to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe just wrap things up with Dorothy Day, who opened up houses of hospitality and charity literally a couple of blocks away from us. Once wrote, "An act of love, a voluntary taking on oneself of some pain in the world, increases the courage, love, and hope of all." So thank you all for inspiring that through you know, your presentations, but most of all, to use Nicola's beautiful phrase, through your witness of charity. Thank you all very much. And we realize that we can't do anything without God's assistance, so it's only fitting that we end the evening with prayer. And I would ask Father Daniel Ray to come up and please close this evening's conversation with a prayer. And thank you all very much.
Before Father's prayer, may I just say one thing? If anybody is interested in learning more about the order, Camille Kelleher, who I mentioned earlier, has some information that she can talk to you about learning more about the order. And if anybody is interested in looking at membership, she has some paperwork with her, and she'll be in the back at the end of the prayer.
And this might be a little bit out of place for me to do this, but just in listening to the presentation, it makes me proud to be Catholic, to hear that this is what's happening. We get beat down a lot as a church, or maybe and I think part of it's just for not recognizing or not even being aware of the breadth from all the way from the UN down to the pair of shoes for the migrant up around Grand Central. That's the breadth. And this is just one organization of many. There's so many things that the Catholic Church does. It's really heartening to hear this, see this, those that are involved in actively doing this. So hopefully there's others here present tonight that with this first exposure will get involved and join. Okay, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this work that you inspired first in Blessed Gerard. You took one person, you gave them a heart, you gave them you gave him this burning desire to make a difference in 1, 2, 3, 10 people around him, and it grew from there. And then it spread. It was your Holy Spirit with the fire of your love in his heart. And we see that you continue to do that today. You've done that in these individuals that are here on this stage, and so many with the thousands of members of the Knight of Malta around the world. So we're just grateful for this action of your love, of your Spirit. And so we ask ourselves, we can't help but ask ourselves before you, Lord, what would you want me to do? Lord, could you give me a heart that is also wants to spread your love, to do good to those around me, to leave myself aside just for an hour, 2 hours, maybe for a week, maybe for longer, in order to serve you and experience the joy that you want to share with me by giving of myself. So we ask that through this evening might inspire us to reflect on that and to be open and ready for action in these coming days and these coming weeks. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May a blessing, Almighty God, descend upon you, remain with you always, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father. And thank you all. Joe, am I missing anything? No? Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you all very much, and thank you all very much.